Well, returning to our top story now, on the front page of The Australian this morning, patrols have detected a sixth boat of illegal immigrants. And joining me to discuss is Liberal MP Tim Wilson. Tim Wilson, good morning to you. Thanks very much for joining us. So what do you make of the information that's been dropped this morning? I mean, was it designed to pivot the focus or the public's attention away from the Tamil families debate?
I don't believe so. I mean, I think it's a reminder of the ever-present challenge that Australia faces, where we have people who want to arrive here not going through the formal channels of the UNHCR to secure claims of asylum, and we need to be ever vigilant. And that's the focus of the government. It's rightly the focus because it's also the only pathway where we make sure that we accept people based on the legitimacy of their claim for asylum and refugee status, rather than merely their self-selected process of arrival. You must admit, though, that the timing is curious. Well, I don't know the rationale behind the timing or how it was received by the newspaper, but it highlights the constant challenge that this government faces and why border security is so central to its agenda. I mean, a government that can't secure its own borders lacks legitimacy, as far as I'm concerned. All right, well, you would have seen there has been a lot of protests that have been taking place around the country over the weekend. Yes. And the government has, as to its defence, expressed some sympathy when it comes to that. But do you believe that the government would at all shift its position? I don't believe the government will shift its position, frankly, nor should it. While we all have compassion for people's circumstances, the reality is so long as we have a cap in the number of people who are accepted as refugees, if people have gone through every single court process available to them and have not found them to be refugees, then they will be displacing people who are refugees. And so while it's difficult, and these decisions are difficult, these are the ones that people elect governments to make in a national interest, and to make sure that under the refugee program we're accepting people who are validly accepted as refugees. The family lawyer was on our program this morning and mentioned a previous example when it comes to the au pair case anyway, so that there has been examples where Peter Dutton has intervened. Does she have a point there? That point is complete rubbish. What she's trying to draw is a comparison between whether people should be accepted as refugees in Australia and displace other refugees versus dealing with the technicalities and operations of different visa classes. It's dishonest, misleading and deceptive to the Australian public, and does damage and harm to people who are seeking to come to Australia or any other country, fleeing persecution and going through legitimate channels to seek refugee status. If we would apply the standards that this person is arguing around administrative processes simply around visas, we would be displacing refugees from all over the world simply for those people who are best at pulling at our heartstrings as a nation. Well, what do you make of the legal tactics? I mean, the legal argument when it comes to their lawyer is that the youngest daughter, the youngest child, hasn't yet had her case heard before the court at the moment. I mean, do you expect that to be any different? I mean, and is it fair that they all should have at least had their chance to appear before a court? Well, I don't want to prejudge decisions by the courts. We operate in a society of laws, and obviously there's an action in the Federal Circuit Court today, and that will be heard appropriately, as any case should. And that's the process by which we apply it. And that's the process, by the way, that has led us to this point, where every single aspect of this case that has been put forward to a court has been heard up until the High Court. And that's why the government, while we all have natural sympathy with the family and the circumstances in which they face, if we were to start saying, well, we'll just ignore that and we'll ignore the decision of courts, we would be displacing refugees for accepting this family, people who are genuinely fleeing persecution and safety for their own life. Well, it is a widely heard argument at the moment that if compassionate grounds, if compassion is shown to this family, then that would kind of open up the floodgates for the many thousands of others who might be trying to get into the country. But let's say, for argument's sake, that this family goes back to Sri Lanka and then applies for a visa legally, stepping into the consulate and doing it that way. What would you have thought the chances of success would be in that instance? I don't know, because I don't know the basis in which they're applying for a visa under those arrangements. But, of course, just like every other person who applies for a visa, I'm quite sure they would receive a fair hearing, exactly as the process demands, based on how people apply and the circumstances in which they apply. And that's exactly the same process they've received in this case, because it's not as though they haven't been entitled to put their application forward. They have. It's not as though they haven't been able to have it reviewed by courts, administrative and higher. They have, and decisions have consistently been made based on the laws of this country.
It's all very timely, isn't it? Right when the government will later on be arguing in the Senate anyway over whether to repeal the Medivac laws. Do you kind of feel like that's a foregone conclusion now that those Medivac laws will be repealed?
Well, I'll leave it to others. I'm not in the Senate to judge what happens in the Senate. But the position of the government has always been that the Medivac laws put the interests of individuals ahead of our national interest and our national border protection arrangements. And that's the basis in which it compromises our national border arrangements, and that's why it's a problematic law. And when you have a situation where people can be assessed on their health without even having to see the individual or the details of their health circumstances, and then bypass Australia's national border arrangements and migration arrangements, is just fundamentally wrong. It doesn't matter what the case is. Any government lacks legitimacy if they're not prepared to do basic things like protect and secure their borders.
Just quickly on another issue, I mean, ICAC is heading into its second week over the New South Wales Labor Party. I mean, I guess this is a free hit for the Liberal Party at the moment, but is the opposition leader, is his involvement enough? And do you have any kind of sympathy for the mess that he's in at the moment, or that his party's in?
Well, I don't really, because it's not as though it's a mess that was created by others, it's a mess that was created by themselves. The New South Wales Labor Party has had a consistent string of involvement where they've engaged in questionable conduct, of course, most extreme by Senator Sam Dastyari, which led to his resignation from the Senate. Now we're told of allegations of Aldi, I think we call them white plastic shopping bags full of $100,000 donations that they allegedly then distributed under different names to get around electoral laws. You know, this is a culture that sits at the heart of the New South Wales division of the Labor Party, of which Anthony Albanese has long been a member.
How large is the bucket of popcorn that the coalition is eating at the moment while it's watching this?
No, actually, I think it's really sad, because ultimately it corrodes trust in our democracy when you see Australia's oldest political party clearly seeking to circumvent and bypass the law, while some of us look at it with a curiosity and wonder what's going to come next, and I'm quite sure there will be more that will come next. It doesn't mean that we're happy about it.
Oh, would you have thought then that the rules that they've got in place are too young, that they've been having, that the people that they're putting into senior positions are too young, that it needs to perhaps be, that needs to come from people of more seniority?
Well, that's a decision for the Labor Party, but I think we're looking at that like these are just rogue individuals. They're not. This is part of a consistent pattern of behaviour that has operated across the New South Wales division of the Labor Party over many years, which has been brought out case after case, of which Anthony Albanese is a member and a long-term member. You know, you go back to Graham Richardson's days. I know he's on this program, but he always talked about whatever it takes. Well, this is an example of the whatever it takes attitude.
Yep. All right, Tim Wilson, as always, Liberal MP, appreciate your time this morning. Good to talk.
Thank you.